Good day, my virtual friend. Tell me, from what corner of the earth are you tuning in? From a peaceful backyard or a skyscraper where the clouds are almost neighbors? Your story belongs in the comments. And yes, gifting this video to your friends is the best way to help the channel. Let's get moving. It had been 4 weeks. That's how long it had been since she'd shown any interest in studying with me again. To be honest, something had been off with her for the last 3 months, but these past few weeks had been the roughest stretch yet. Just last night we ended up fighting, again. I'm drained from how she's been behaving lately. She's always been quick to anger and even quicker to stew in it. No surprise, considering her roots. Full-blooded Irish. Back when she was single, her name was Clara O'Shea. Now she goes by Clara Mallory. Never Kathy, never Kate, always Clara and only Clara. Early in our dating days, I once called her Cat. I found out real fast that was a one-time mistake. I'm Christopher Mallory, her husband. Yes, I've got Irish ancestry too. We've been a couple since we were both 16, teenage sweethearts. Took me no time to learn that when Clara got going, the smart move was to let her go. That's been the rhythm of our relationship for 26 years, 22 of them married. She's got fire in her, no doubt. Still, I've never stopped loving her. That wild, untamed red hair, eyes like emeralds, skin pale as porcelain and scattered with freckles. I was captivated from day one. We were each other's first real love. First kiss, first everything. When we started seeing each other seriously, we had a candid talk about limits. She looked me straight in the eye and told me, I'm waiting until I'm married. And I respected that choice entirely. Even now, like she had so many times in the past, she whispered, I like the way you do it, while we were together. But this time, something about it didn't sit right. Afterwards, I told her I was heading to the shower. If I didn't go in first, I knew I'd be stuck waiting forever. As the hot water poured down, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. She'd said that same thing dozens of times before. So why did it suddenly cut deeper than usual? Maybe it had something to do with the strange distance that had crept between us lately. There wasn't a clear cause I could point to, just a gnawing sense that something was off. And when she slipped into these moods, I'd learned to give her space. Usually they faded after a week, 10 days tops. But a whole month? That had never happened before. I like the way you do it. Why did that phrase echo like it meant something more this time? After finishing up, I wrapped a towel around my waist and walked back into the bedroom. All right, sleepyhead, I said. Bathroom's all yours. She let out a groggy sigh, but eventually got up and made her way in. In the early days of our marriage, we were inseparable. Morning, night, even sneaking off for a quick lunch break together when we could. Back then, I worked as a mechanic. She had a job at Target. We didn't have much, but we were all in. Totally in love. I stuck with the shop until I turned 28. Then the owner of a nearby Napa store approached me with a proposal. He saw something in me, something I hadn't fully seen in myself yet. At the time, I was pulling in $40,000 a year, wrenching cars day in and day out. He and I had built up a good rapport, whether I was picking up parts or he was dropping by the garage. He had 2 locations and was planning to open a third. Needed a manager. He figured I'd be a solid fit. I had the technical skills, the certifications, and knew how to treat customers right. One night, he invited me out to dinner, said he had a job offer to discuss. Turns out he had something even bigger on the table. He asked me if I'd ever thought about running my own business. Of course I had. Who hasn't dreamed of that? I won't get into all the gritty details, but here was the gist. I'd join his company, same salary, for the next 10 years. Over that period, he'd train me, prep me to take over. He'd put aside money every year into an account to serve as my down payment. At the end of the decade, he'd sell me the store. It was all built on trust, sealed with nothing more than a handshake. That was enough for me. I gave notice and made the jump. What drew me in most? The flexibility. At the time, our son was 12 and our daughter was 10, both heavily into sports. This new schedule meant I could finally show up to their games. Of course, the flip side was more nights and weekends. When I told Clara about the change, she was livid I hadn't run it by her first. I hadn't even told her about the potential to own the place someday. And I definitely hadn't mentioned that there was no formal contract. She went nuclear. I tried to explain, told her I was tired of missing out on our kids' lives, and this job would fix that. I told her it'd be a long-term win for the whole family. She wasn't buying any of it. She kept me in the doghouse for more than a week. Honestly, during that stretch, part of me wished the offer would fall through. I wasn't sure I could handle another full-scale Clara meltdown. I'd felt this sensation before, during vacations, family gatherings, and long weekends at campgrounds. Now, after 2 years of distance, I found myself excited at the thought of surprising her again, something I hadn't done in close to 8 years. Truth be told, our relationship had seen better days. My stagnant income didn't help, becoming a recurring source of arguments between us. I kept telling her to trust me, to hold on just a bit longer, but I understood how hard that was for her. My job as a mechanic, once a steady 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. routine on weekdays, had morphed into something far less predictable, sometimes starting as late as 9 a.m. and dragging well into the evening or weekends. Still, that flexibility gave me time to show up for our kids' sports, baseball, soccer, softball, and being there mattered deeply to me. It was about 2 years ago when I first noticed a change in Clara. Her temper, already quick to spark, seemed to ignite faster. She started throwing verbal jabs my way, not constantly, but often enough to leave a mark. That kind of biting commentary eats away at you. It bruises your pride and festers into resentment. And in the last few months, it had gotten even more unbearable. I tried confronting her, tried to clear the air. At first, it seemed to help. She apologized, and for a few days, maybe a week, we found some peace. But before long, the same patterns crept back in. Whenever I brought up her behavior, she'd glare at me with irritation, and then lash out with even more aggression. Naturally, all that tension started seeping into our home life. Soon enough, I found more comfort at work, growing the business, than I did at home. Work, at least, was going well. We'd grown into 4 locations, and our commercial clientele kept expanding steadily. Clara, for her part, had always worked, aside from the breaks she took after the kids were born. Eventually, she landed a job with an insurance firm and now manages one of their branches. From everything I've observed, she's excellent at it. Having managed people myself, I get how stressful that role can be, and I attributed part of her recent mood swings to that pressure. I'd asked her a few times what had shifted in our relationship over the past couple of years, but she never offered a real explanation. Whenever I pressed too much, she'd get defensive, angry even. That morning, as I got dressed and prepared to tackle the usual list of housework, my mind wandered back to the beauty of the day. It made me smile. Still, a low, unsettled feeling lingered under the surface. Her words kept echoing in my head. I like the way you do it. The weekend rolled by uneventfully, and the next week followed the same worn path. Clara remained distant, impatient, and edgy. By Friday night, she was home late again, just like the previous week. But this time, her sexual demands were even more forceful than before. We're both Irish. Not that it always matters, but in some ways it explains the fire we both carry. I may not have her hair-trigger temper, but I've got my own line that shouldn't be crossed. And that night she crossed it. When she said, "I need you to cater to me," something inside me snapped. I shot back, "I'm not your servant. Handle it yourself." I wasn't going to let her treat me like a puppet. That night I ended up sleeping in Kyle's old room. He'd moved out about 6 months ago, so it was sitting empty. While grabbing a change of clothes from our bedroom, I heard the shower running. Just then, her phone buzzed with a text. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe fate, maybe something higher. But a couple of years back, Verizon had changed their messaging interface. Now incoming texts popped up in full on the lock screen. You didn't even need a passcode, just a tap. That small feature altered everything. I picked up her phone and saw a message from someone saved as CB. It read, "So did he do it?" CB, what was he talking about? What was I supposed to have done? I tried to piece it together. She hadn't been intimate with me after our fight, and I didn't remember her taking any calls or stepping out. So what exactly was this message about? Then it clicked. I like the way you do it. This time the word "you" landed differently, as if she was drawing a comparison. But with who? There shouldn't be anyone else for her to compare me to. The idea made me physically ill. I bolted to the bathroom, lifted the toilet seat, and threw up. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she called through the door. I glanced back at her, then leaned over the bowl again, retching. "Must be a bug," I managed to say, voice hollow. I needed time to think, to breathe. I couldn't accuse her without being absolutely certain. "Maybe it's something you ate?" she asked gently. "Could be," I murmured, my mind racing. I don't remember exactly what or when. As I stood up, she reached out, trying to feel my forehead. I recoiled. "Don't touch me," I said. "I don't want you catching anything," she said, her voice light, almost too casual. I didn't respond. I simply turned around and walked back toward the bedroom. "I'm going to run out. Need to pick up something for my stomach." I tossed over my shoulder. I was out the door before she even started getting dressed. Behind the wheel, I drove aimlessly, letting the roads carry me while my thoughts unraveled the mess of the last few months, maybe even the past couple of years. There had to be someone else. There was no other explanation. This woman, my wife, the girl I'd loved since high school, felt like a stranger now. Maybe she already was. Maybe she had been for a long time. I couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. I needed to be sure. But she kept her phone locked, and I didn't know the password. Her laptop was off limits too. We'd always honored each other's privacy. That used to mean something. We built our relationship on trust. Now, I had no choice but to dig beneath the surface. I couldn't accuse her without hard proof. I looped around the neighborhood a few times. I knew I couldn't be gone too long, or she'd start wondering. I needed a reason for the trip: Pepto-Bismol, cold medicine, whatever I could grab quickly. I stopped at the store, picked up a few basics, and headed back. My plan was simple: fake being sick and disappear into Kyle's room for the day. As soon as I got back, I went straight to the bathroom, took a gulp of Pepto, a small dose of NyQuil, and then dragged myself into our son's room like a man defeated. A moment later, Clara walked in. "Any better?" she asked, her tone soft and concerned. I didn't want to speak to her. I muttered something non-committal, undressed, and climbed into bed. She placed a hand on my forehead. I jerked away instinctively. "You're not running a fever," she noted. If only she knew. I was burning with suspicion, with anger. The betrayal simmered just under the surface. "I'll make you some soup," she offered gently. "Don't bother," I said, clipped and cold. "I'll just end up throwing it up." The thought of her doing anything for me made my stomach turn. I didn't trust her anymore. I couldn't even be sure she wouldn't tamper with it. "I just need to sleep," I said. "Maybe I'll feel better later." "All right," she said quietly. "I'll check on you in a bit." But I had no intention of sleeping. Instead, I lay there, trapped in a flood of memories. How we met, our wedding day, raising the kids, our family trips, Kyle's graduation. Chloe's was right around the corner. There hadn't been any obvious signs, no glaring red flags. So what went wrong? Yes, the last few years had been rocky. But why? When had the ground started shifting beneath us? Lying on the carpeted floor, I began constructing a plan. I needed undeniable proof. Once I had it, I'd have to face the truth head on. Our marriage wouldn't survive it. And I'm Irish. That means two things: a temper that doesn't cool easily, and a memory that never fades. We don't forget, we don't let things slide. Just ask the British how long we can hold on to a grudge. If she'd betrayed me, I'd never forgive her. Especially not if she expected me to help clean up her mess. To cover for her affair? Hide her tracks? The thought made my skin crawl. Some things are beyond redemption. But I needed details: when, where, with whom. I had to catch her in the act. When you've lived side by side with someone for years, you notice everything: routines, subtle shifts, the tiniest changes. That was the key. That knowledge would be my weapon. Of course, it wasn't just strategy. A stroke of luck helped tip the scales. I got up to use the bathroom and headed toward our bedroom. Clara was in the kitchen. Her phone was on the nightstand. I picked it up. A new message flashed on the screen from someone labeled CB. "I made the reservation for Wednesday afternoon," it read. A reservation? My mind jumped to the worst-case scenario: a hotel. Who books a restaurant in the afternoon? Dinner, maybe, lunch, occasionally. But the middle of the day? It didn't say where, but that didn't matter. I could take Wednesday afternoon off work and follow her. Perks of being a manager, I had control over my schedule. The next few days, I kept my distance. The fake illness gave me the weekend to hide. Monday and Tuesday were spent at the office. We barely crossed paths. Sleeping next to her those 2 nights was unbearable. Every breath she took beside me felt like a lie. I forced myself to stay quiet, emotionless, just in case she was watching me too. No words, no touch, just a thick wall of silence between us. It's wild what you can pretend when you really have to. By the time Wednesday rolled around, I was strung tight. I grabbed a bite at Wendy's, but I couldn't eat more than a few bites. I parked my car down a quiet side street near her office. From there, I had a clear view of the parking lot, but stayed tucked away just enough to be invisible, unless she happened to be scanning for me. And she wouldn't be. An hour went by, then another 30 minutes. Doubt started whispering in my ear. Was I wrong? Could that text have been nothing? Maybe it was just business. But all those late-night texts, the vague answers, the guarded expressions, my gut told me I wasn't imagining this. So I waited. Just after 2:30, I saw her boss step outside and drive off alone. And at that moment, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was I losing my grip on reality? I kept cycling through our recent conversations in my mind, along with the sudden shift in how she acted around me. Something felt off. This wasn't paranoia. There had to be more to it. Roughly 15 minutes ticked by before I caught sight of my wife leaving her office building. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Whatever was happening between her and her supervisor, whether harmless or not, I couldn't keep living in the dark. So I followed her, quietly. She didn't catch on as I trailed her from a distance, watching her steer into a dingy roadside motel, one I instantly recognized as the no-frills kind where each room opens directly to the parking lot. Not a conference center, not a work hotel. I kept my car tucked away on a side street just out of view. She lingered behind the wheel for a moment before stepping out. Even from across the lot, I could sense something had shifted. Her stance, the way she carried herself, it had purpose. She marched up to one of the rooms, ready. Before her knuckles could reach the door, it opened. Caleb, grinning like he'd been waiting for her all day. She walked inside and the door shut. I snapped a picture before it did. That was all the confirmation I needed. No more guesses, no more benefit of the doubt. She'd crossed the line, and she'd face the consequences. When you've been with someone as long as we had, you learn their patterns better than they know their own. I knew exactly how to play this in a way that would leave me on top. Like I've said before, I'm Irish, and I've got a fire in me. This was the moment to let it burn. Seething, I drove back to the house. Chloe was still at softball practice. That gave me the time I needed to set things in motion. Our home sits near the outskirts of town. We'd picked it for the lot size, big enough for me to build a 2-car garage with a loft up top. That loft had become my refuge, my personal haven. I installed a hoist out there, tuned engines, worked on cars, mine and others. When Clara was in one of her foul moods, that place kept me sane. The upper level even had a cot where I'd crash when the tension inside got too thick. I jokingly called it the doghouse, though there was more truth than humor in the name. Once I got back, I headed straight to our bedroom. I emptied out my drawers, cleared my side of the closet. She wouldn't notice right away, not with how good she was at pretending. But this time I wasn't going to fall for her act. There'd be no kisses, no intimacy. Not after she'd spent time with him. I gathered up all my stuff, clothes, toiletries, and moved it to the doghouse. Then I went back inside and waited. At exactly 5:30, she walked through the door. I was in the living room, glued to the TV, putting on a show. "Is Chloe back yet?" she asked casually. "Nope," I answered, flat as a board. Most likely Chloe was out grabbing food with her teammates. Senior year meant she was rarely home on time. "Oh," Clara said, drawing the word out like she was baiting a hook. That tone, soft and scheming, meant she was working up to a request. I didn't turn toward her. Let her try. I wasn't giving her anything for free, so, she said sweetly, "Looks like we've got the house to ourselves. What should we do with it?" "We could grill a couple steaks, toss together a salad," I muttered. eyes still locked on the screen. "I can think of something more delicious," she whispered, turning up the charm. "Well," I said coolly, "if you're craving takeout, just tell me where to pick it up." She leaned in, voice low and sultry. "I'll tell you where. Our bedroom. 1 minute." I shot her a look, playing surprised. "Let's go upstairs," she said with a wink. "Might as well take advantage of the quiet." I followed, pretending to take the bait. Like a dog after a bone. She stepped into the bathroom, probably freshening up. That's when reality hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't the woman I married. She was 42, putting on an act, desperate to stay desirable. To keep myself from retching, I imagined someone else. Younger, honest. When she came out, her eyes were closed, waiting. I got up from the bed and opened the nightstand drawer. The click made her eyes snap open. "What are you doing?" she asked, clearly irritated. "Just getting something," I said evenly. "Aren't you going to use that experience of yours?" she said with a forced grin. "I'm not really in the mood," I said, voice flat. "What?" Her tone climbed. "What are you doing?" "Taking precautions," I replied as I slid on a condom. "Excuse me?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't know where you've been. I'm not taking any chances." Her face turned crimson in seconds, like watching mercury rise in a thermometer. "You son of a bitch," she hissed. "You know exactly what this is," I said coldly. "So do I." That's when she exploded. "You goddamn asshole! Who do you think you are, hurling accusations at me like you're some kind of authority? Where do you get the nerve? You're a store manager at a second-rate auto parts chain, been stuck in that same position for nearly 10 years, too afraid to even ask for a raise. And her? She was out there hustling nonstop. That's what this was really about. Not the fight, not the words. It boiled down to one thing: she didn't respect me. No matter how hard I tried, no matter what I gave up for her and the kids, it never met her standards. I got dressed in silence as she shouted from across the room, lashing out with every word she could find. I said nothing, just walked away. I headed for the garage, climbed the steps to the room above, my retreat, and closed the door behind me. Moments later she followed, yelling from below, demanding I come down and confront her like a real man. I knew my quiet would only fuel her rage, and that was exactly the point. For the first time ever, I dialed 911 on my own wife. It wasn't spontaneous. I timed it, hoping they'd arrive just in time to witness her spiral. Her voice kept echoing up the stairs, pure venom, not a hint of shame or remorse. She wasn't sorry. She was furious I dared to suggest she'd been unfaithful. Furious that I finally saw her for who she really was. When I stayed silent, she came storming up, tried the handle, then hammered on the door, spewing every nasty insult she could muster. She went on for 5 agonizing minutes. Then abruptly she stopped. I knew her too well. She was going for the spare key. I acted fast, dragging the bed against the door to keep her out. That's when something didn't feel right. There was a strange smell. I pushed the bed aside, unlocked the door, and looked down. She was gone. Instead, I saw flames climbing the walls of my workshop. A gas can lay nearby, emptied and tossed aside. Fire was spreading fast. I shouted, "Are you insane? What the hell are you doing?" No reply. She had already gone outside. I rushed to the window and spotted her in the driveway, just watching it burn, a wicked grin on her face. I climbed out the window and stood on the garage's small ledge. Below me, gravel. Behind me, heat and smoke growing by the second. I jumped. Hit the ground hard, scraped hands, twisted ankle, sharp pain shooting through my leg. I was trying to drag myself away when she came running over, yelling obscenities. She hit me a couple of times before the police showed up. One officer radioed for the fire department, while another grabbed Clara and cuffed her, despite her flailing and screaming. "Let it burn, all of it," she shrieked. "Burn his stupid little hideout to ashes." They shoved her into the back of the squad car. One officer came over to me and asked for my account. I gave a toned-down version, from when I got home to the moment they arrived. We were both taken in for statements. She ended up charged with arson, possibly attempted murder. I asked about a restraining order. They said I'd need a lawyer for that. So I made the call. My usual attorney, a business lawyer, connected me with someone at his firm, who handled criminal cases. By the next morning, the order was signed. She was banned from coming within 500 feet of me, our home, or my job. She remained in jail awaiting her arraignment. Honestly, it all went more smoothly than I expected. Maybe it was dumb luck. That night, I sat down with Kyle and Chloe to tell them the truth. Chloe wasn't surprised. She'd seen her mom's darker side plenty of times. I said I was sorry. She hugged me. Kyle was furious. It would take time, but I believed he'd come around. Those two were my entire world. That's why I'd already chosen a career path that gave me more time with them. Now I knew without a doubt that it had been the right call. The following morning, I met with another attorney at the firm to start divorce proceedings. When I pulled into the driveway later that day, a police cruiser was already there. Clara had made bail, probably thanks to the guy she'd been seeing, and was being allowed to collect her stuff under supervision. I read the court order, got back in my car, and left. The weekend passed without incident. I spent it cleaning what was left of my retreat. Most of the heavy-duty tools survived, all the electronics were ruined. I called my insurance agent. He said coverage wasn't guaranteed. Since she co-owned the property, it could become a legal issue. That would be a battle for another time. That night, I found myself retracing our whole relationship in my mind. She was my first love, and the only one I'd ever had. I had been hers too. But clearly, I hadn't been the last. How was I supposed to move on from that? One thing I knew for sure. I couldn't keep living the way I had been. Trust is everything to me. Once it's broken, there's no gluing it back together. I'm not the forgiving type. I don't let things go. And this? This was the one betrayal I could never, ever forgive. Still, I needed the truth. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. Had Caleb been the first? What triggered all of this? Was it something I did or failed to notice? The way she screamed at me, it was obvious she no longer saw me with any respect. Had they been talking about me when I wasn't around? Was he making jokes at my expense, writing me off? Had he been chipping away at my role at Napa Parts? I needed to know who this Caleb Branson really was. So I started digging around online. It's surprising what you can uncover with enough determination. Turns out, her company had hired him about 2 years back as the general manager, responsible for all 4 locations. The owner had decided to step away from daily operations to ease into retirement. Interesting how that timing lined up perfectly with when Clara began to grow distant. It made me question just how far back this had been happening. Caleb was a divorced father of 3. His kids were teenagers and young adults, aged 15 to 20. They lived just an hour away. Clearly, I had more research to do. But before anything else, I needed to reach out to the owner of the company. We'd met a few times at corporate events, and he even started bringing his cars into my shop. We'd built a decent relationship. I was sure my old manager still had his contact info. I wanted to lay everything out for him. That was going to be my priority on Monday. Then, late Sunday night, Clara finally called. Her voice was heavy with remorse. "Christopher, I'm so sorry. I lost control and set the garage on fire," she said. "And?" I replied coldly. "Does this mean I can come back home?" she asked, almost timidly. "No," I said without emotion. "There's a restraining order in place now." "I found out when I posted bail," she admitted. "Who bailed you out?" "My parents, they're furious." "Yeah, well, so am I." "Can we just talk? Maybe we can work through this," she begged. "There's nothing left to work through," I told her. "Christopher, I still love you," she said, her voice trembling. I have a temper." "No, Clara. If you loved me, you wouldn't be sleeping with your boss." "That's not true." "Which part? That you love me? Or that you're cheating on me with him?" There was silence. Then she whispered, "Both. I saw you with him at that motel. Don't lie to me." She gasped. "Why, Clara?" I asked. I needed to know. "It was a mistake. It only happened once," she said quickly. "Don't insult me." I'd heard enough lies. I hung up and powered off my phone. Half an hour later, someone knocked at the door. It was her father, a man I'd known for over 25 years. He'd practically been family. When he stepped inside, he looked genuinely confused. "What did she tell you?" I asked him. "She said you two had a fight and you threw her out," he replied. So the half-truths had already begun. "Did she mention anything about going to jail?" I pressed. He hesitated. You know how she is. She said she went back to the garage and tried to burn some old manuals. Things spiraled. I shook my head. You need to ask her for the full story, I said. Then tell me what really happened, he insisted. I'm not sure you want to know, Mr. O'Shea. Why so formal? You've always been like a son to me. Because after this, that might change, I said. And I think you'll end up blaming me. Is it really that bad? He asked, uncertain. I gave him a brief nod, enough for him to grasp everything without needing a single word spoken. As for how long it had been happening, I couldn't put a date on it. What I do know is this. Something between us changed 2 years ago. Then, 3 months back, the cracks deepened, and in the last few weeks, it became almost unbearable. The look in his eyes said it all, heartbreak plain as day. No father wants to picture his daughter caught in something like this, especially with a man who isn't her husband. He returned my nod, turned away, and left in silence. A few hours passed before his message came through. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. That was her moment, the point at which the truth could no longer be avoided. I imagine he went home and demanded an explanation. There were likely raised voices, harsh words thrown like daggers. Wouldn't surprise me if he marched her straight to confession that same night. How much she revealed, the full truth, some version of it or nothing at all, I can only guess. When I got in touch with her boss, he knew exactly who I was the moment I spoke. Christopher, been a while. How have you been? What brings you to call today? I'm afraid this isn't a pleasant conversation, I said bluntly. There was a pause. Oh, he responded, falling quiet, clearly waiting for more. How do you break the news that the woman he employs, your wife, is involved with his right-hand man? I thought you should know. My wife and I are divorcing. He let out a breath. That's rough. She's always been a reliable part of the team. But why tell me? I could hear the shift in his tone, realization dawning. He knew I wouldn't be calling without good reason. She's been unfaithful, I said, with Caleb Branson. I didn't dress it up. I didn't protect anyone. And I made it clear it might affect his business. Jesus, he muttered under his breath. I had a gut feeling when I hired that guy, he added. Asked why he was leaving his kids behind. He said he was divorced, but something didn't sit right. Should have looked into him deeper. That one's on me. Don't beat yourself up, I told him. They're grown. They made their choices. Christopher, would you mind giving me until week's end? He asked. I can't undo what's happened, but I can handle what comes next. For both of them. There's just one thing, I added. If Clara loses her job now, the divorce will be harder on me financially. I'd really appreciate your help keeping her on, at least for the time being. She's always done good work, he said. That's fair. I thanked him, and we ended the call. I'd always respected the guy, and having her stay on the payroll would ease things on my end. The divorce papers were delivered to her office. I specifically asked for it to be handled quietly and respectfully. I knew many of her coworkers, and we'd always gotten along. Now I couldn't help but wonder what they'd think of me. Clara called the moment the papers landed on her desk. I barely managed a greeting. The first thing out of her mouth was, "You son of a bitch!" That was enough for me. I hung up on the spot. No reason to entertain that kind of rage. Working as a mechanic teaches you a lot, especially what keeps an engine running and what can destroy it. Until now, I'd never used that knowledge with malice. But that was about to change. Caleb Branson's Lexus was about to experience a very expensive failure, and depending on how things played out, his transmission might decide to quit next. People say knowledge is power. I won't argue. Caleb's Friday? It was anything but smooth. He never made it to the office on time. His car died midway through his commute and had to be towed. When he did show up, the boss was already waiting. He didn't make it past that morning. His actions didn't align with the standards of the company. Clara called me soon after, and I answered with a cheerful, "Hi, Clara." She didn't even pause. "What did you do?" "Do about what?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Don't play dumb," she barked. "Clara," I said, my tone steady, "let's let our lawyers handle any further communication. Don't call me again." She tried to say something, but I ended the call. I knew that would send her into a fury. She rang again, straight to voicemail. I deleted it without listening. But I wasn't finished with Caleb. I reached out to his ex-wife and laid everything out. She didn't need much convincing. She was more than willing to help. That Saturday, she came into town. I'd made a reservation at a restaurant that used to be a family favorite. I invited Kyle and Chloe to join us. I wrestled with the decision, but in the end, it felt necessary. Clara needed to hear it. And through her, so would Caleb. We got to the restaurant before Caleb's ex-wife arrived, just as we had arranged it. The table was set for 4, and my kids likely assumed their mom would be joining us for the meal. When Megan, Caleb's former spouse, approached, I rose from my seat and held out a chair for her. Both children looked at me with questioning eyes. "Kyle, Chloe," I said, "this is Megan Branson. She'll be having dinner with us tonight." Their expressions stayed uncertain. I added, "Megan used to be married to Caleb Branson, the same Caleb your mother has been seeing. I thought it might be useful for you to hear things from her perspective." Throughout dinner, Megan opened up about her past marriage and how it unraveled. She talked about forgiving Caleb once after he cheated, but when it happened again, she realized the damage to their trust was irreversible. She spoke plainly. Trust is the bedrock of any connection, romantic, friendly, or professional. Once it's broken, the whole structure crumbles. I turned to the kids. "Your mother and I agreed to meet with you tonight so we could explain this together. I'm not walking away because I stopped caring about her. Truthfully, I probably still do, even if I can't be around her right now." I paused before continuing. The divorce is about trust. When it's gone, you live in a constant state of doubt, wondering why someone's late, where they are, who they're with. You can't live like that. And I've tried. By the time dessert arrived, the tone had shifted. It no longer felt like a tense confrontation. It felt like a conversation among family. The kids asked Megan meaningful questions, and she answered without sugarcoating anything. She even asked them questions in return. That's when I discovered they'd sensed something was wrong a year earlier. They'd picked up on signs, but hadn't voiced them. It's strange, really, how the partner is often the last one to see the truth. As we got ready to leave, we shared brief hugs. Then Chloe asked, "Are you heading home now?" I replied, "Actually, I was thinking about inviting Megan to the dance tonight if she's still interested." I glanced at Megan, who gave a subtle nod. Chloe looked at me again, and I could see the realization setting in. Megan and I danced until nearly 11 that night. I drove her back to her hotel afterward. Before stepping out of the car, she asked if I wanted to come up to her room. I told her no. As much as I respected her, and as strong as the temptation was, it didn't feel right. Things were still too unsettled. We hadn't even filed for divorce yet. I said I'd pick her up in the morning for breakfast. Some habits are hard to break. That's how we ended up at my usual breakfast place the next day. The waitress recognized me immediately and came over, smiling. "The usual for you two?" she asked. But as soon as she looked across the table and saw it wasn't my wife, her face shifted, confusion written all over it. "Heather, meet Megan," I said, keeping it light. "We danced our feet off last night and figured we'd better refuel." Heather paused for a moment before asking for our orders. I got my usual. Megan went with the Eggs Benedict. We shared stories and laughter over breakfast, fully aware of what Heather must have been thinking. And I knew, sooner or later, Clara would hear about it. After we ate, Megan checked out of her room. We spent the rest of the day together. She was warm, thoughtful, and engaging. I kept asking myself, how could anyone betray someone like her? Later that evening, she stepped out briefly but returned before nightfall. Just before she said goodnight again, she looked me in the eye and said, "If you ever feel like spending more time together, just say so. I might just say yes sooner than you'd expect, if you're still single." But I had the sense she wouldn't be single for long. A woman like her wouldn't go unnoticed. And as expected, word traveled. Clara found out about the dinner and the breakfast. She called me the following week. "So you're already seeing someone else?" she asked, her voice icy. "We're still married, you know." I replied, "That didn't stop you." "And just to be clear," I added, "nothing happened with her." "Oh, really? Dinner at night, breakfast the next morning, and you just had a chat?" she said, dripping with sarcasm. "What we did or didn't do isn't your concern anymore," I said. "We're ending this marriage." I asked, "Have you signed the papers yet?" "No," she said quietly, "because I don't want a divorce." "Well, what you want doesn't change reality," I told her. "Delaying things won't stop them from happening. It just makes the process longer, and that's on you." Then I added, "Ask your dad what he would have done in my place." She went silent, nothing on the other end. She knew the answer. Her father wouldn't have tolerated what she'd done. A few days later, my attorney got in touch. Clara had finally signed the divorce documents. I had a feeling she spoke to her father. But anyone who's been through a divorce knows that's not the end of the story. Not when there are kids involved. You still have to talk. That part never really goes away. Chloe's graduation was the first time I had laid eyes on her since we split up a week earlier. Amid the digital noise and tech-filled setting, what really hit me was how much she had changed. She seemed older, leaner, and emotionally removed. Physically, the weight loss flattered her, but there was a shadow in her expression that said otherwise. She looked burdened by something I couldn't name. For a brief second, I felt a twinge of compassion, until she opened her mouth. Her voice carried a sharpness, almost like she was accusing me of something, implying intimacy where there was none. I didn't bother to clear my name. Instead, I asked the one thing that had been eating at me. I expected to see him. "Caleb, he got let go, remember?" "You played a part in that," she added without missing a beat. "He struggled to find another job. My supervisor didn't exactly sing his praises. He had no choice but to move." Trying to make sense of it all, I pressed her. "He didn't ask you to come with him?" She locked eyes with me and said flatly, "I never loved him." "You didn't love me enough either," I said, then turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard her break. Her mother muttered "asshole" under her breath. I didn't even think women from her church knew that word. The open house was scheduled for the following Saturday. Clara and I decided it would be hosted at what was still technically our shared home. Our divorce papers hadn't been finalized yet. I let her handle the event planning, which included temporarily lifting the restraining order so she could come and go without issue. Watching her back in the space that used to be ours, slipping into familiar routines, was more jarring than I anticipated. Everything she did had the sting of memory, echoes of what we'd had. Megan had been right. No matter how deep my resentment ran, my feelings for Clara hadn't disappeared. After Chloe had left with her group, we began cleaning. I was elbow-deep in garbage in the kitchen when Clara appeared beside me. "Thanks for letting us do this here, and for letting me be involved," she said in a low voice. "You're always going to be her mom," I replied, still focused on tying up the trash bag. "Christopher, could you look at me?" I paused, turned to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry for how I hurt us," she said. It was the first time she'd actually said sorry for the affair. "Why'd you do it?" I asked, searching her face for something honest. Her eyes welled up. Then she turned and left without answering. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she just wouldn't. Months passed. The divorce moved forward. By some strange stroke of good fortune, Irish luck, maybe, life offered us a small win. Late last year, Chloe got into college. To help her out, we took on a second mortgage, $100,000. Half of it paid her tuition. The other half went to Kyle, who was getting his start in auto repair. He was following the path I once walked, enrolling in courses at the local tech center, taking online business classes, and working toward his ASE certification while apprenticing at my old shop. I felt a strong sense of pride. I told him I'd back him every step of the way. Thankfully, the house hadn't built up much equity, and outside of modest savings and our retirement accounts, there wasn't much to split. When the house sold, we each walked away with about $15,000. Since our incomes were about the same, there was no spousal support involved. Clara eventually pled guilty to the arson charge. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, ordered to complete anger management, and began seeing a therapist. From what I could tell, it was making a difference. Then, not long after the final court ruling came through, she called and asked to meet, just to talk. "Okay," I said. "What about the place we used to love?" I arrived 10 minutes early, but she was already seated. She looked anxious, but there was something steadier, more grounded in her demeanor. We placed our orders and chatted lightly while we ate. Then, her eyes still down on her plate, she murmured, "This is nice. I've missed it." "So have I replied. She looked up at me. "I'm sorry." Again I asked, "Why?" She knew what I meant without needing clarification. "I was stupid," she admitted. "I saw someone who looked successful, charming, ambitious, worldly, and then there was you. Same town, same job, no flashy goals. I couldn't see beyond that." She paused, grasping for the right words. "I didn't understand then. You took that job to be there for the kids, and because of that, they thrived. If you hadn't made that choice, you'd have missed their games, their milestones. You traded your dreams to make theirs real, and I didn't see the value in that. I stopped respecting you. I'm truly sorry." She took a breath. "I'm sorry for how I reacted too. Burning the garage, I regret it. I've learned a lot about myself, about my anger. The therapy's helping." In one dinner, she said more apologies than I'd heard from her in 10 years. Maybe she really had changed. "Thanks," I said. "And I'm sorry I never became the man you wanted me to be." As we walked out, we hugged goodbye. Before pulling away, she whispered, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm still here. You were always the best of us." Her words made me flush, though I doubted I'd ever take her up on that offer. Some things just don't come back. Some fruit turns and there's no saving it. As I drove home, a familiar thought crossed my mind. I should call Megan. "Still flying solo?" I asked. "Or has someone managed to sweep you off your feet lately?" "Solo," she replied. "I was seeing someone, but he dumped me for a shinier, younger version he thought was an upgrade." "That sucks," I said. "But selfishly, I'm kind of glad to hear it." "When can we see each other?" she asked. "Your place or mine?" she added with a teasing tone. "Would it be all right if we met at your place?" "Sure, that's totally fine," she agreed easily. The idea sat well with me. Her house had been a comfort zone for her ex-husband for far too long. I wanted to reclaim that space in some small way, even if just for one night. Dinner was excellent, and afterward we ended up back at her house. With her kids spending the week at their dad's, the place felt peaceful. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pretending this was just some light, no-strings thing. "Megan," I began, "I really like you. I'm not sure what this is turning into, but I want to be upfront." She turned to me attentively, so I went on. "I'm here for a couple reasons. 1, you're stunning. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And 2, I need this to move on. This is the first time I've been with anyone since learning about my wife and your husband." I paused, scanning her face for any sign of discomfort. "I hope that doesn't come off as cold. I respect you. I'm not here to use you." "Christopher," she said softly, "since we reconnected and started talking these past few months, I've realized I've wanted this too. Maybe I'm looking for some closure myself. Caleb and I weren't married yet when your wife got involved with him, but there were plenty of other women along the way, and I never got even the slightest bit of revenge." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Maybe it's time I even the score, just a little." That moment shattered whatever tension remained between us, and soon we were in the bedroom. Roughly an hour later, as we lay side by side, my thoughts wandered to Clara. I couldn't help but recall the early days of our marriage, when even then her temper showed itself in flashes. Over the years, her outbursts grew worse. The littlest things would set her off. She'd yell, even lash out physically sometimes. Sure, I've got Irish blood and a temper of my own, but I was taught never to raise a hand to a woman. Whenever things escalated, I'd retreat to the garage, a kind of self-imposed exile. Looking back, I wonder if she saw that as weakness, me walking away instead of fighting back. Maybe to her that meant I lacked a spine. The night she torched the garage while I was still inside was when I finally knew I couldn't stay. How could I live with someone I feared might go too far during one of her rages? The betrayal, the abuse, the erosion of trust, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore. Leaving was the only way to survive. I had my freedom now, but at a cost. I wasn't whole. Could I ever risk giving someone my heart again? Could I invite a woman back into my inner world, my daily life, my mind, my space? With Megan, I didn't think that's what this was. For me, this was about mending, not starting over. She had grace, strength, and beauty, but I didn't see us as a couple in the long run. What brought us together wasn't love. It was shared hurt, the desire for peace, for pride, maybe even revenge. Perhaps we could become lovers, perhaps friends, but life partners. The one thing we shared, a mutual resentment toward our former spouses, wasn't a strong enough foundation to build a future on. We stayed close, touching skin with gentle fingers, letting silence speak for us. "You really are something, Megan," I murmured. "You knew just what I needed somehow." "Me?" She chuckled softly. "You were the one guiding things. You understood me so well. You're thoughtful, Christopher. Generous. Honestly, it baffles me that your ex thought she could do better." "Well," I said, "she sure wasn't getting this kind of care from Caleb." I hoped she'd be open to continuing this, not a relationship, but a connection rooted in honesty and mutual need. I enjoyed her presence. We clicked. At one point, I told her she was only the second woman I'd ever kissed, let alone anything more. Before I left, she leaned in and kissed me tenderly. "I hope this won't be the last time," she said. "I'd like that," I answered. "But I'm not in a place to commit to anything serious right now." Then I paused, unsure whether to voice what I'd been thinking. "There's something else," I said. "Go on," she replied, curiosity piqued. "I'd like Caleb to find out about tonight. I'll make sure Clara hears about it too, if you're okay with that." Her eyes sparkled mischievously. "That sounds kind of perfect." "I don't want to seem spiteful," I admitted. "That's not the only reason I came here." "It's okay," she said. "I was thinking the same thing. Sometimes a little revenge is the closest we get to justice, especially when it's earned." Once I was back in my car, I pulled out my phone and typed out a quick message to Clara. "Call when you've got a minute, maybe Monday. Nothing urgent. I don't use emojis or slang. Never have. I guess I'm old-fashioned that way." Within 3 minutes, the phone rang. "Hey, Christopher," came her voice. "You finally ready to take me up on that offer?" "No thanks. I'm exhausted. I don't need anything right now. Megan's got energy to spare, though." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, just barely, I heard her murmuring to herself, 8, 9, 10. "So this was just an excuse to brag about your trust fund again?" she snapped, her temper flaring in that familiar Irish way. At least she tried to count to 10 this time. "I never called," I said calmly. "I just sent a message. You could have waited till Monday like I said. It wasn't urgent." Eventually, she muttered, "Fine, I'm sorry." The words sounded forced, like they barely made it past her pride. I figured those anger management sessions had only done so much. Still, credit where it's due. She tried. "I actually wanted to hear what your plans are with Chloe in the near future. Any trips I should know about?" The truth? I needed some kind of reason to get her on the phone, so I could sneak in a little dig about Megan. "Oh, I'll have to talk to her and let you know," she said. "No rush, just keep me informed." I tried to keep my voice light, casual, like none of this divorce stuff really bothered me. I hoped it would get under her skin. I wanted her to believe I didn't care anymore. But I did, more than I liked to admit. I've always thought men take divorce harder than women. Maybe it's primal, some territorial instinct, or maybe it's just that male pride. We hate losing. Whatever the reason, it hit me hard. But I swore I wasn't going to let it drag me down. Not again. Not for long. About a week later, the thing I half suspected might happen did. There was a loud knock. No, more like someone trying to break the door down. I knew who it was before I looked. I dialed 911, gave them my location, hung up, and opened the door. Caleb burst in like a lunatic. "Caleb Branson, get out of my apartment," I yelled. "You don't belong here." "I don't give a damn," he shouted. "I'm gonna break your face." "Leave, now," I barked back. "You were trash for chasing after my wife, and you're still trash." "What's your problem now?" I asked, glaring at him. "Stay the hell away from my wife," he growled. "You mean your ex?" I shot back. "She dumped your cheating ass years ago. Guess you still haven't figured out why. Don't go near Megan, he snarled through gritted teeth. Why not? She's a wild ride. That pushed him over the edge. He lunged at me. I dodged the first hit but let the second land. I needed visible proof of the fight. He worked on cars all day, even part-time, so he had the strength. I just moved paper and typed reports. When the cops arrived, I looked like hell, but Caleb looked worse. They separated us, confirmed I was the one who made the call, and cuffed him on the spot. Once I cleaned up, I called Megan to give her the update. I heard, she said, unfazed. Can you believe he actually asked me to bail him out? She paused for a moment. Are you okay? I've been better, but he's worse off. I'll come by. Time to play nurse, she said before hanging up. About an hour later, she was dabbing at my bruises like a pro. Luckily, I had a late start the next morning, didn't need to be up until 11, and I barely managed 4 hours of sleep. On her way out, she flashed a smirk and said, You and that mouth, and those hands, seriously magic. I started thinking maybe I needed to take a breath. This was getting intense, fast. We'd have to talk, soon. Then, just after lunch the next day, my phone rang. Clara. I didn't have any clients in front of me, so I answered. What the hell did you do? She said without a hello. Well, nice to hear from you too, I said. Yeah, whatever, what did you do? I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied, playing dumb. You had Caleb arrested. Nope, I said. He managed that all on his own. That's not the version he gave me. So you believe him over me now? Typical. He's not my boyfriend, she said. That ended a month ago. Sure, if you say so, I said, clearly not buying it. She groaned. Why do you always have to be such an ass? I guess I learned from the best, I shot back. Are you going to drop the charges? She asked in a low voice. And give me one good reason I should? I shot back. He broke into my place, no invitation, no warning, and went after me. You think I should just pretend that never happened? He'll lose his job, and I'm asking you to, she said softly. You're not my wife anymore, I reminded her, my voice cold. I don't owe you anything. You don't get to ask me for favors. I ended the call right then. Even though she'd claimed for months she was done with him, here she was, still running interference, still trying to shield him from consequences. He'd been arrested on assault charges. If convicted, he was staring down at least 90 days in jail. His career? Pretty much over. I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction when I heard the news. That Thursday evening, I ended up at Smitty's, the bar we used to call our spot. I probably should have known better, but when everything's unraveling, familiar places have a way of anchoring you, even if only for a moment. I found myself in a dim corner nursing a beer when a burst of laughter broke through the low hum of conversation. I knew that laugh instantly. Heron. I looked over. Clara. She was walking in with a group from work, 6 of them in total. She spotted me before they made it to the bar. Her body went rigid for a beat. Then she leaned in, whispered something to the group, and without missing a step, they altered course and took a table as far from mine as the space allowed. But the layout betrayed them. Any trip to the restrooms would bring them right past my table or force a wide detour around the whole place. 10 minutes in, 2 of them got up and made for the bathrooms. And like clockwork, I found myself wondering, why do women always go in pairs? Is solo bathroom use forbidden? As they neared, one of them paused and turned my way. You're Clara's ex, right? I gave a quiet nod. I've heard a lot about you, she said, her expression teasing, eyes lit with something unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was flirting or mocking me. With Clara as the source, it could go either way. On their way back, both slowed down again. This time it wasn't small talk. They were outright flirting. One looked maybe a decade younger than me, the other even younger than that. It struck me then. Women don't seem to follow the same unspoken rules guys do. No one batted an eye about flirting with a friend's ex. That boundary just didn't seem to exist here. So naturally I played along. Hooking up with one of them, even just for a night, felt like it would land squarely in Clara's gut. Yeah, I knew it was petty. Mean even. Still, part of me wondered when all this resentment would finally burn itself out. As they were getting ready to leave, one of them extended her hand. Nice meeting you. Maybe we'll bump into each other again. When I shook her hand, She passed me something. I waited until she'd returned to her table before checking. A business card, a name and a number scribbled on the back. Shannon Lozano. Yeah, I was definitely going to call her. When I looked up, Clara was watching me. Her face shifted, first a flicker of sadness, then that sharp, familiar fire in her eyes. I sat there for a moment, lost in thought. I had loved her. In some stubborn, painful way, I still did. But she was always unpredictable, like living at the base of a volcano, never sure when the next eruption would come. Looking back, I don't know if I was naive or just desperately in love to have stayed so long. I would have kept staying, too, if she hadn't cheated. Am I better off now? Hard to say. Maybe not knowing the answer is its own kind of mercy. My beer was nearly empty. I finished the last sip, dropped a 10 on the table, gave a silent nod to the waitress, and headed for the exit. I didn't look back. Couldn't risk her seeing the tears that were starting to sting my eyes. Saturday morning, just before noon, I pulled her card from my wallet and tapped in the number. She answered on the third ring. "Hello?" she said, cautious but curious. "Hey, Shannon, this is Christopher Mallory. We met Thursday night at the bar." "Oh, right! I remember. You were the good-looking guy drinking alone." Her compliment caught me off guard. I felt my face flush a little. "Yeah, that was me," I said, trying to keep it light. Just needed to get my thoughts straight. "Want someone to talk it out with?" she asked, direct and fearless. I hesitated just for a moment. "Yeah, I think I do." The words escaped my mouth before I even had time to register the thought. "How about tonight?" she suggested, her tone light but clearly suggestive. This time I didn't hesitate long. "Sure," I said. "How does Smitty's around 7:30 sound?" "I'll be there," she replied without missing a beat. The moment I put the phone down, anxiety kicked in. Why would a woman nearly 10 years younger show interest in someone like me? Did I even remember how to go on a proper date anymore? It had been more than 25 years since I'd last gone out with someone new. What did modern women even want? What were the rules now? Only one way to find out, and that was tonight. I settled on a business casual look, maybe slightly overdressed for a laid-back spot like Smitty's on a Saturday, but I wanted it to be clear I'd made an effort. From the moment we sat down, conversation flowed naturally. Yes, she was beautiful, but more than that, she was sharp, open, and easy to talk to. Once I felt a bit more at ease, I finally brought up the question that had been nagging me since we met. "So you work with my ex. I assume you've heard some things. Why agree to go out with me anyway?" She smiled, just slightly. "Actually, before she got involved with Caleb, maybe a year before your divorce, she said a few things about you that caught my attention." My eyebrows lifted. "She and Caleb have been seeing each other that long?" She shook her head. "Not officially. Back then, it was more like casual lunches and long chats. But if I had to guess, the real affair started maybe 3 months before you filed the paperwork." That tracked with the change in her demeanor I'd started to notice. Initially, I'm sure she felt guilty, but over time she must have assumed I was clueless, and from there, the respect started to fade. Even so, during girls' nights, bachelorette parties and the like, she'd go out of her way to mention some pretty flattering things about you, if you know what I mean. She shot me a look only a woman can, teasing but intense, and slowly traced her tongue along her upper lip. I felt my cheeks warm. Sure, I knew some women talked like that, but I never imagined Clara being one of them. "Don't be bashful," she said, grinning. "If you're even half as good as she made you sound, we're in for a great night." She eyed me like she was sizing me up, like a cat watching a mouse. And I couldn't help but wonder just what I was getting into. Dinner wound down and the server came by with the check. I handed her a 50 and said, "Better hold on to that receipt, you might be lucky." She gave me a look, curious, maybe amused, then winked before walking away. I slipped the receipt into my wallet, still puzzled over what just happened. Outside, Shannon slipped her hand into mine and said in a low, playful voice, "Ready for dessert?" Once again, I was caught off guard. Clearly, I was out of my depth in this dating game. "Your place or mine?" she asked, giving me the decision. I wanted her to feel at ease, so I let her lead. "Let's head to your place," she decided. "You can tell a lot about someone by their home. I want to learn more about you." So we drove to my house. She climbed into my truck, which meant I'd eventually be driving her back. "Is it okay to leave your car here overnight?" I asked, trying not to sound too forward. She smiled. "I took an Uber, figured I wouldn't need my car until tomorrow." Once again, I was reminded how much the world, and dating, had changed. The moment we crossed the threshold, the chemistry ignited. We made love. When we finally drifted off to sleep, it was well past 10 the next morning before we stirred again. We went for lunch at Chili's, then I drove her home. Before getting out, she made me promise I'd call. "I expect a second round," she said, flashing a mischievous grin. I told her I would. She'd certainly made an impression. Later that day, I stopped by the grocery store. As I reached for my wallet at checkout, I noticed the Smitty's receipt still tucked inside. When I pulled it out, I saw that the waitress had written her name and number on it. Apparently, life still had a few surprises in store for me. By Monday evening, I found myself back at Smitty's. Helen, the waitress, was there again, closer to my age with a warm, easygoing presence. We struck up a conversation, and eventually I asked when she might be free. Since weekends were her busiest shifts, we settled on Wednesday, her day off. As I headed to my truck, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized. "Hello?" I answered. "Hi, Christopher," said a woman's voice. "Yes," I replied. "This is Bethany. We met last Thursday. Shannon and I stopped by your table at Smitty's." "Oh, right, I remember you," I said. "I talked to Shannon earlier. She said Saturday night was incredible. So, I was wondering, would you be interested in going out with me sometime?" "Am I not a bit out of your usual age bracket?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. "Not even close," she replied. "I've always leaned toward older guys. They're more grounded and less of a hassle." "Fair enough. How's Saturday sound?" I asked. "Saturday's perfect," she confirmed. "Anywhere in particular you'd like to go?" I followed up. "I'm easy, you choose," she said with a casual shrug. We locked in plans for Saturday night, and let's just say she lived up to her reputation for going with the flow. Some of the things we got into, honestly, I didn't even know a few of those positions were physically possible. Wednesday night with Helen, flawless. Just like with Shannon and Megan, Helen told me, "You've really got a way about you." They'd both said something similar. Then Sunday rolled around, and Megan called to invite me over for dinner. A home-cooked meal was exactly what I needed, so I didn't hesitate to say yes. Dinner was fantastic, and the evening that followed, even better. I was beginning to genuinely appreciate the upside of being single again. By Monday night, I got a call I'd been half expecting. It was Clara. Her tone was sharp, laced with the same old judgment I knew all too well. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped. "Just watching TV," I said, playing dumb. "You're 40 years old, dating women who are 10, 15 years younger? Don't you feel even a little embarrassed?" "You must mean Bethany and Shannon," I said coolly. "Obviously," she fired back. "Well, they made the first move. I just didn't say no. Better than sitting around alone." Dating had changed. I liked not having to chase anyone, not having to gamble with rejection. It felt good to be wanted again. "Then stop dating my coworkers," she said, her tone like ice. "And why would I do that?" I asked, unfazed. "Because I told you to." "I don't take your orders anymore," I told her, plain and clear. "We're no longer married. I can see whoever I want." "You're only doing this to make my life harder," she accused. "I'm not, but if that's a side effect, I can live with it." "Do you even know what this feels like for me?" she continued, her voice rising. They whisper when I walk by. I hear them say, "Can you believe she let him go?" They think I'm some kind of idiot. I thought, well, if the shoe fits, but instead I said, "I'll ask them to keep things discreet. That might help, yeah?" "No," she said coldly. "Just stop seeing them." "I won't, unless they decide to end things. I like their company. They make me feel alive again, boost my confidence." "You're such an asshole," she said before abruptly hanging up. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face as I recalled the moments I'd shared with each of them. They'd definitely done wonders for my ego. By Wednesday, I'd had another perfect night out with Helen. My life had become a smooth stream of good nights and better mornings. Then Thursday evening rolled around and my phone lit up again. Clara. Now what, I thought. I hadn't even run into Bethany or Shannon yet this week. "Yes, Clara? What's up now?" I said as I picked up. Oh, and now the waitress from Smitty's, really? She snapped. At least she's closer to my age, I said dryly. Didn't you say you had an issue with me seeing younger women? I don't want you dating anyone, she said, her frustration boiling over. I have to keep explaining to everyone what was so wrong with me that I let you go. Just tell them you found someone who better aligned with your goals, I offered calmly. There was silence on the other end. Then, in a much softer tone, she said, Maybe I'll just tell them I was stupid. Click, she hung up again. I sat there staring at nothing. Clara and I had shared some truly great times, but somewhere along the line she drifted. Funny thing, that was around when Caleb started working with her. Maybe something had already been going on between them. Now she sounded like someone grappling with regret. My feelings were a mixed bag. Part of me was glad she might be realizing she'd let go of something valuable. But another part? That part still wanted what we'd had. The truth is, the past doesn't give second chances. And whatever we had, it was scorched too deep to ever go back. That door wasn't just closed, it was locked and boarded up. A wave of melancholy began to creep in as I sat there. Then I noticed I was out of beer, so I grabbed my keys and headed to the store. As I exited the store with a case of Shiner Bock in hand, my phone started ringing. It was Shannon on the other end. What's up? She asked once I answered. I just grabbed some beer and I'm heading home to drown my sorrows, I said. Want some company? She offered. Maybe I can help take your mind off things. To be honest, that sounds like exactly what I need, I admitted. We shared a few drinks at my place. She made it obvious again and again that she was having a good time. Around 2 a.m., she glanced at the time. I should probably get going. I've got work early, she said. Before you leave, I said, thanks for talking to Clara with Bethany. And I'd rather if tonight stayed between us. I spoke with her earlier, she said, her tone turning solemn. She didn't seem like herself. Yeah, she's not, which is why I'd rather keep this quiet. Of course. Still hard to believe she let you go, Shannon said. I gave a small, appreciative smile. Thanks. Tonight really helped pull me out of a dark place. I mean it when I say this any time, she said softly. In the months that followed, my inner circle grew. Shannon told Bethany, who told Megan, who told Helen. Word got around about my talents, and each one was curious to experience them for herself. I didn't say no to any of them. They all looked different, came from different walks of life, but each encounter was fulfilling in its own way. I made it a point to learn what they liked, what excited them. I figured out how to give each one exactly what she needed. Every woman had her own unique switch, and I got good at finding and flipping it. At first, Clara called me a slut. It didn't sting. I enjoyed women. I enjoyed pleasing them. And every single one of them ended up saying the same thing, the line that had started it all. I love the way you do that. Eventually, Clara stopped reacting when she saw me or heard about me with someone new. Then one evening at Smitty's, she came over to me herself. We were really good together, she said. Why not one more night for old time's sake? I shook my head. I can't, I told her. What we had back then came from love. Doing it now would just be using each other. She looked wounded but gave a small nod. I understand, she said, and returned to her table. Then it finally happened. I was officially granted the Napa franchise. The owner kept his word. He thanked me for sticking with him and offered a buyout that was more than generous. I had to take out a loan to close the deal, but the shop was thriving, so I wasn't too concerned. Initially, I pursued the opportunity for both of us, for security, for the life we dreamed of. Now it was just for me, for my future. That night, I called Clara and asked her to join me for dinner. She said yes. I reserved a table at the nicest restaurant in town. I arranged a car to pick her up and told her to dress for something special. When she walked in, she looked breathtaking. She'd clearly put effort into the night. The long black dress clung perfectly to her figure. Her red hair flared brightly against the dark fabric, and her emerald eyes sparkled even more in the low lighting. Seeing her, I remembered instantly why I had fallen for her. All I ever wanted was to be enough for her. I stood up as she reached the table. You look stunning, I said. Thanks, she replied with a smile. And you look sharp in that tux. What's the occasion? I'm celebrating something important. I wanted you to be the first to hear about it. Well, Now I'm intrigued, she said. Let's eat and you can tell me all about it. I'd rather let the food and ambiance do their work first, I said, holding back a little. We made casual conversation while waiting for our orders. As dinner progressed, the discussion gradually shifted to deeper topics. After a few courses, she finally set her fork down, leaned toward me, and said, "Okay, I can't wait any longer. What are we celebrating?" I smiled, knowing she wouldn't last the whole meal without asking. "Clara," I began, "after we got married, I spent my days in the garage, wrenching on cars. You always seemed supportive, even proud." "I was," she replied, "but I felt stuck, trapped. And once Kyle and Chloe got involved in sports, I hated not being able to show up for them." "I remember that. We talked about it," she said. "Exactly. So when I mentioned the opportunity with Napa, how it'd give me more flexibility, I thought you'd be on board. I thought you'd be excited. And instead, I lost it," she admitted. "I told you it would pay off for us in the long run. And you were right," she said softly. She dropped her eyes to her hands and went quiet. "I thought I was doing it all for the family," she eventually murmured. "For the kids, their routines, for you. Every sacrifice I made, I believed it was building something better for us." When she lifted her face again, I saw a trace of regret lingering in her gaze. "And in the end, I ruined everything," she breathed. "I didn't bring you here to revisit all that," I reminded her softly. "I told you, tonight is about celebrating, not rehashing the past." A hint of hope flickered across her face as she looked at me again. I wasn't sure what she was hoping to hear. "I just signed the final documents today. I bought into a Napa franchise, 4 locations, all up and running." My face must have shifted because her expression changed instantly. She looked stunned, confused by the shift in my demeanor. Clearly, she didn't get what I was feeling. I gave a brief smile and said, "I can't even begin to tell you how glad I am." I took another moment to read her face. Her mood had soured again, melancholy washing over her like a tide. When I asked her what was wrong, the tears began to well up. "I believed Caleb when he told me you had no future," she said, voice cracking. "He said you had no drive, no ambition, no fire, that you'd die without ever accomplishing anything." And now she was weeping openly, unable to hold it back. "I lost it all because I stopped believing in you. I trusted him, and with that, I let go of the respect I once held." Leaving felt like the easier choice at the time. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin, staring at me through tears and swollen lids. "I'm sorry, Christopher, I mean that. I regret every decision that led us to this point." Without warning, she stood up and hurried toward the restroom, her shoulders trembling. A nearby server noticed and followed after her. Funny how women never seem to go to the bathroom alone. I'd imagined this evening as a moment of celebration, something we could someday share with our children and grandchildren, a landmark evening that marked a new chapter of growth and prosperity. But I hadn't expected her to unravel like this. I felt the weight of her sorrow. I understood it more than I wanted to admit. But I couldn't be the one to ease it. Opening that door again would only bring more pain to both of us. Life finds ways to make us face the consequences of our decisions. And those consequences don't always show mercy. I motioned to our server and asked for the bill. Clara wouldn't be up for finishing the night, not after this. She returned to the table a few minutes later, looking like she had more to say. But I stood up first. "I've already taken care of it. Let me drive you back." "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for ruining your evening." "I'm sorry for ruining us." She cried softly the entire ride home. More than once, I had to stop myself from reaching across the seat to offer comfort. But I knew better. Any gesture like that could be taken the wrong way. I wasn't ready to go back there. When we got to her place, I walked her to the front door. As she unlocked it, she turned toward me, her eyes searching, an unspoken question hanging between us. Did I want to come in? "I'm sorry, Clara," I said gently. "But we can't return to what we were." She nodded slowly, then turned and closed the door behind her without another word. The years that followed were a blur. Business thrived, my schedule was packed, and I was rarely without female company. They say the best marketing is word of mouth. In my case, it held true, both in business and elsewhere. Not a week passed without me dating at least 2 women. I kept things clean, No games, no carelessness. Catching or spreading something was never on the agenda. Clara and I still kept in touch now and then. Lately, most of our conversations centered around Kyle and his engagement. He'd only been dating her for 8 months, but he was convinced she was the one. She'd come to his shop for an oil change. Amber Williams, that was her name, and Kyle had been hooked from the moment she stepped inside. They planned a big engagement party so everyone could meet her. Kyle had held off proposing while his business was getting off the ground. But even with the challenges, he was sure she was it. On the day of the celebration, I arrived early to help him set up. We had a conference room rented at the Sheraton, with several 6-foot Subway sandwiches and all the extras. As we were finishing the final touches, Clara arrived. Even after all these years, I had to admit, she still carried herself well. More than 25 years together leaves a mark you don't easily forget. She walked straight to where I stood by the punch bowl. "We never had an engagement party, Christopher." "No," I said, "but everyone knew we were together." "Do you remember?" she asked softly. "I do," I replied, "but today isn't about our past. It's Kyle and Amber's day." She nodded. "You're right. Let's just keep things pleasant today." "I'd like that. Maybe we could work on being pleasant from now on?" The way she said it, brisk, pointed, just on the edge of commanding, took me right back to the old days. That familiar tone she used so often when we were married. She always left me uncertain. Sometimes she seemed full of genuine remorse. Other times the old sharpness crept back into her voice. Guests began filtering in. Kyle's friends, Amber's relatives. We had no choice but to stay cordial. Kyle and Amber greeted each person who walked through the door with genuine warmth, taking care not only to introduce new arrivals, but also to weave them seamlessly into the conversations already in motion. Around 45 minutes into the evening, I was mid-discussion with Kyle and Chloe when a voice I knew well rang out. "Mom." I turned instinctively toward the sound, and there she was. A stunning woman in a softly flowing sundress patterned with flowers, the fabric catching the light just so. She stood tall, maybe 5 feet 8 inches, with graceful posture, a figure that exuded elegance, and golden hair that mirrored her daughter's. Her brilliant blue eyes lit up the room, and her radiant smile caught me off guard. It sent a flutter through my chest. "Dad! Dad!" "Hey," Kyle said sharply, pulling me back to earth. "That's Amber's mom. Yeah, she's beautiful, but don't get any bright ideas. She may be single, but she's definitely not someone you'd have a shot with." I looked at him puzzled. "She's extremely religious," he added. "That's why she insisted Amber attend that Christian college nearby. It's her alma mater." He lowered his voice. "Her ex was unfaithful. She doesn't exactly trust men with, complicated histories." "Kyle," I replied, my voice firm but calm. "Before your mother and I separated, I never strayed. I've always been committed to the woman I was with. I still believe in love. I still hope to find someone I can build something real with, someone I can trust with my whole heart." "Well," he said with a shrug, "I'm not saying she's the one. Frankly, I doubt she'd even give you a second look. But if you want to meet her, I'll introduce you." "I'd like that," I told him, and he led me across the room to where Amber and her mother were chatting. "Mrs. Williams," Kyle began, "this is my dad, Christopher." She let out a laugh, warm and teasing. "Kyle, you're about to become my son-in-law. Can't you just call me Mom already?" At that moment, Clara appeared behind us. "He can," she said dryly, "as long as he remembers who his real mother is." Kyle exhaled and gestured between them. "Mom, this is Alyssa, Amber's mother." The two women hugged politely and launched into conversation as if they'd known each other for years. Sensing it wasn't the right time, I quietly stepped away. I had been hoping to share a few words with Alyssa, maybe plant the seeds of a new connection, but with Clara hovering nearby, I figured it was better to wait. Her presence always had a way of clouding the air. I mingled, chatted with old friends, and made small talk with other guests. Some of the guys made light jokes about my past relationships. A few women kept a polite distance, while others didn't mind striking up a conversation. While I was engaged in a casual exchange with a woman named Charisse, divorced, smart, and friendly, Clara suddenly inserted herself again. "Watch out for him," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You never know what you'll catch." My jaw clenched. Turning to Charisse, I said calmly, "Ignore her. She's upset that I won't play along with her drama anymore." "You're such a jerk, Christopher," Clara snapped. "And you really need to stop crashing my conversations," I retorted. "Let's just steer clear of each other and keep things peaceful." Then I looked at Charisse and asked, "Care for a short walk? I could use some air." I didn't have any romantic expectations with Charisse. Truthfully, I just needed a breather, and part of me wanted to get under Clara's skin. Still, our walk led to a nice, light-hearted chat, and we parted ways with a promise to reconnect sometime down the line. It wasn't until nearly 2 hours had passed that I finally got a quiet moment with Alyssa. "So you're the infamous Christopher," she said, her tone edged with mild suspicion. "Guilty," I said with a smile. "Kyle's dad, if you haven't already been warned." "He's a good man. I just hope he doesn't break my daughter's heart," she said without mincing words. "He loves Amber deeply," I assured her. "He's focused, loyal, and ready to build a future with her. You can trust him." She nodded slightly. "Let's hope that doesn't change." "I'm certain it won't. I'll be holding you to that," she replied. "And for the record, it's going to be a church wedding." "I think that's beautiful," I said. "There's something powerful about standing before God and the people you love to make those vows." I paused, then added, "Look, I know there are probably stories floating around about me, some accurate, others not so much. If you ever want to ask me anything, I'll be straight with you. And if you're open to it, I'd like the chance to get to know you too." She studied me. "I've heard a lot. I understand," I said softly. "But we're about to be part of the same family. Maybe we can start fresh, at least try to see each other without the rumors in between." After a brief silence, she relaxed just a bit. "Maybe, but this isn't the time or place for that kind of conversation. We could meet up later, maybe dinner," I suggested gently. She narrowed her eyes, half smiling. "That sounds suspiciously like a line. Are you trying to charm your way past my defenses?" I laughed. "You choose the time and place, I'll be there." "I live an hour away," she said. "If you're serious about talking, you'll have to prove it." "I'm serious." "Tomorrow's Sunday," she said. "I'll be at church in the morning. If you're free, pick me up afterward. We can go to Cracker Barrel." She gave me the name of her church, its address, and the time the service would end. And just like that, the door opened. She'd told me where to meet her, and I agreed without hesitation. For the rest of the evening, we exchanged quiet, infrequent glances across the room. I think she saw something in me, something that made her curious, maybe even a little uncertain. I must have seemed like someone she should avoid, yet I made no effort to conceal who I was. I was entirely open. As the night wound down, Clara came up to me. "Amber's a sweetheart," she began, "but I can't help feeling like everything's happening way too fast between them. Did you hear they're aiming to get married within a year? They barely met. How can they be ready for something so serious in such a short time?" "Clara," I said gently, "Kyle's a smart man. He knows what he wants, and he's going after it. I get it. Fast relationships can come with risks," I continued. "But think about us. We took our time. Years passed before we got married, and we still didn't make it. In the end, longevity doesn't guarantee success. It's about intention and commitment, and from what I've seen, they both seem fully invested." She looked at me then, her face clouded with quiet regret. In that look, I saw something unspoken, an acknowledgement that she hadn't lived up to our promises. Even after all this time, it hurt. But oddly, there was a sense of resolution in it too. Walking away had been the right choice, even if the ache hadn't fully disappeared. Still, I needed her to carry that weight too. When Sunday morning came, I rose early. I shaved, showered, put on my best suit, and drove the hour-long route to Alyssa's church. I got there half an hour before the service started and picked a seat about a third of the way from the back. As I settled in, I took in the unfamiliar space around me. It was a far cry from the churches I knew growing up. Having been raised Catholic, I expected stained glass, the altar front and center, candlelight flickering in the dim, and the familiar rituals, bells, communion, chalice, crucifix. But this place was different. There was no ornate pulpit, just a small platform and a plain wooden cross on the wall. To say I felt like I didn't belong would be putting it mildly. Still, I was determined to stay until the end. As people continued to arrive, the space filled with casual conversation. Some had coffee in hand, Starbucks cups and mugs from local spots. Most were dressed casually, jeans, t-shirts, polos. In my suit, I stood out clearly. But despite that, everyone who passed by greeted me warmly. No one gave me the cold shoulder. I kept glancing around, wondering if Alyssa had changed her mind or been held up. Then I noticed some movement near the front. Musicians were getting into position. That's when I spotted her. She was standing with the worship band, singing into a mic. It surprised me that she hadn't seen me sooner. I wasn't exactly blending in. But during the third song, her gaze finally found mine. She smiled as she sang, her voice rich and beautiful. When the music ended, she made her way over and slid into the seat next to mine. Her presence grounded me. I'd felt unsure of myself until that moment. "I didn't actually think you'd show up," she admitted. "I definitely feel a bit like a fish out of water," I replied. "Pretty sure I overdressed." She smiled and teased, "If you want, you could ditch the costume." I chuckled and slipped off my jacket, resting it on the pew beside me. "Thanks for sitting with me," I said. "You're my guest," she answered. "Of course I would." "Well, I appreciate it," I said again. The service was unlike anything I'd experienced before, but it had an easy, welcoming feel that I genuinely appreciated. Afterward, Alyssa led me around, introducing me to the pastor and several people in the congregation. "This is Amber's future father-in-law," she said proudly. Later, we went to Cracker Barrel for lunch, and the conversation started light, comfortable, easy. But toward the end of the meal, her tone shifted noticeably. "So, Christopher," she said, looking me straight in the eye, "I've heard some things about you. People say you're a womanizer, that you sleep around. Want to respond to that?" "Well," I said calmly, "I guess that depends on what you mean by womanizer." "Someone who chases women just to get them into bed," she replied, "and then walks away afterward." "If that's the definition," I told her, "then I can say honestly, that's not who I am." "So someone's lying to me?" she asked, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Let me give you some context," I said. "Let me tell you a bit about my story, how I ended up here." "All right," she said. "I'm listening. I was married to Clara. You met her last night. We were together for over 25 years, married for more than 20. But in our final year, everything started to unravel. She began an affair with her boss. I uncovered the reality when I followed her. She had arranged a secret rendezvous with him at a cheap roadside inn. For months before that, her behavior toward me had grown distant and emotionally cold. When I finally laid all the evidence before her, she snapped and tried to end my life by setting the garage on fire while I was still inside it. I took swift legal action. I filed for divorce and secured a restraining order against her. Once the divorce papers were signed and the process was over, I slowly began dating again. Maybe this sounds like too much information, but I feel like you deserve the full picture. People talk, especially women, and I have a strong feeling that Clara may have shared some very personal details about my performance in the bedroom. That sparked curiosity, and a few women wanted to see if the rumors held any truth. I wasn't chasing after anyone. I simply didn't reject the interest when it came my way. One experience led to another, and word continued to spread. Over the past couple of years, I didn't say no when women asked me out. I sincerely enjoyed being with them, and if I could make them happy, I did, wholeheartedly. I hope you won't think less of me for that. I just didn't see any reason to withhold affection or kindness from any woman, regardless of her looks or her past. Every woman carries her own kind of beauty, her own story, and I wanted them to feel seen and appreciated. If that doesn't sit right with you, I understand. But that's the truth of how I felt. She gave me a look, curious, skeptical, and asked, "So where do I fit into all this?" "Alyssa, you're breathtaking, and you know it," I replied. "From what I've heard, you've been through pain, just like I have. While I chose to stay around people and keep busy, she, by contrast, seemed to have cut men out of her life entirely. I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, there's someone among you who's open to knowing me better. maybe even open to love, I said. The truth is, I'm single, and I'm searching for someone who could someday become my forever. She looked me straight in the eye and asked, "And what about your ex? Didn't she ever try to fix things? Pretend none of it happened?" I met her gaze and answered, "You already know the difference between forgiving and forgetting." The truth, I never forgave her. You can't just erase betrayal. Once trust is broken, everything becomes a question. Where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. And without trust, there's nothing solid left. No future, no hope. "I know exactly what you mean," she said. "My ex thought I'd just move past it all, that we'd continue on like we hadn't fallen apart. But I couldn't. Not for him, and definitely not for myself. What happened damaged my self-esteem, shattered it. And I swore to myself that I'd never give a man that kind of power over me again, and I haven't. In that sense," I told her, "you and I are more alike than you might think. The only real difference is, I didn't shut myself off from women altogether. I spent time with them, but I never let anyone in, not where it truly mattered." She gave a quiet nod, thoughtful. Then, repeating her earlier words, she asked again, "So, where does that leave me?" I took a deep breath. "Well, we both carry our own scars when it comes to trust," I admitted. "But I want to get to know you better, to go out, spend time, and see if we can build something meaningful." She raised an eyebrow and asked, "And the other women?" "If it turns out that what we have is something real," I said honestly, "then I'll commit to you, completely." She was silent for a moment, then spoke with conviction. "Just so we're clear, I won't be intimate with anyone until marriage." I smiled at her warmly. "Alyssa, back when Clara and I were still young, high school sweethearts into our early 20s, we waited. We were each other's first. Sure, we messed around a little like any young couple, but she always made it clear, no sex until we were married." I respected that completely. "So what you're saying doesn't scare me, not at all. If this turns into something serious, I'll wait as long as you need." That seemed to bring her some comfort. She looked at me and said softly, "Christopher, I appreciate your honesty. And truthfully, I think I like you. Let's see where this leads." Over the next 4 months, we kept seeing each other regularly, twice a week, without fail. Sometimes she'd come to my place. Other times I'd go to hers. Even though I was still going on occasional dates with other women during that time, something had shifted inside me. That thrill I used to feel, it was fading. Charisse, the woman I'd met at an engagement party, was particularly determined. We went out more than once, and she clearly wanted things to progress faster than I did. She told me, like a few others before her, "You're the best I've ever had." The tone of her voice made it clear she was comparing me to other men. That kind of flattery used to puff up my ego, but lately it just left me feeling empty. One night, while having dinner at her place, Alyssa looked at me and said she was finally ready to take things seriously. That moment lit something up inside me. "I couldn't be happier," I told her. "From here on out, I'm yours, and only yours. To be completely honest, the last few months have felt hollow whenever I wasn't around you. It might sound like a lot, but I've fallen for you. Most people might say those words come too soon, but if life has taught me anything, through all the messy experiences and long late-night talks, it's this. Women value honesty. They want the real you." She paused, searching my face, and then quietly said, "I think I'm falling in love with you too. Please try to understand. I had already shown more than enough patience, both in my heart and through my actions. It happened on a day when my mood was unusually bright, and Clara happened to call. 'Hi, Christopher,' she said cheerfully. 'Hey, Clara,' I replied. 'How's your day been? Need anything?' 'You sound oddly upbeat,' she chuckled. 'Yeah, I guess I'm just feeling good today. What's going on?' 'I was wondering if you'd want to come over for dinner sometime soon. I have something I'd like to talk about,' she said, as if it were no big deal. 'How about tonight?' I offered. 'Perfect. I was thinking roast beef with vegetables, your favorite. Want me there around 7? You don't think we should go out instead?' I asked, not wanting her to go to any trouble. 'No, I'd prefer to keep it between us. This isn't something I want to share with the world,' she said gently. I paused for a beat. 'All right, I'll be there. Should I pick up anything?' 'I could bring a bottle of wine for the meal,' I suggested. 'Sounds good. See you tonight.' After the call ended, I sat with a sense of unease. What exactly was she planning to say? We hadn't talked deeply in a long time, just surface conversations here and there. My curiosity was sparked, but so was a nervous tension. Wanting to be transparent, I called Alyssa to tell her. She probably wants to talk about the wedding. It's right around the corner, Alyssa guessed. She's cooking roast beef. She must be trying to soften me up, I said. Well, let me know what it's really about when you find out, she requested. I will, I promise. At exactly 7 p.m., I was standing in front of Clara's door. My stomach churned with nerves. I had no idea what was coming. She greeted me warmly and welcomed me inside. Most of the meal passed with light conversation and old stories, but eventually she steered us toward the real reason for the dinner. Christopher, she started slowly, Kyle's wedding has had me doing some thinking. Thinking about what? I asked cautiously. About us. About the marriage we almost had, she said, her voice quieter now. There is no us anymore, Clara, I replied gently but firmly. But she pressed on. Do you remember what it was like back then? How much we laughed together? How easy it all felt? I remember, I admitted honestly. What we had was rare, don't you think? It was, back in those days. So what changed? Life happened, I said, offering what felt like the only explanation. She leaned in a little. I was talking with Shannon at work, and your name came up. Oh? She's with someone new now, but when she mentioned you, there was this look on her face. She told me you were exactly what she needed at the time. Okay, I said, unsure where this was headed. Then I ran into Bethany. She said you've stopped your usual social routine, as she called it. All right. She thinks you're finally ready to settle down, that maybe the casual phase is over. What Clara didn't know, or hadn't been told, was that I had been seeing someone for a while, someone close, her mother, in fact. Kyle and Amber had kept that detail from her, and I was grateful they had. When a smile crept onto my face at the thought, she misunderstood it completely. Maybe we could give things another chance, she said carefully. You and I always worked so well together. Then, nearly whispering, she added, before I ruin everything again. Clara, we had something good, that's true. But the key word is had, I said. Lately I've realized something important. I needed to forgive you. Her eyes brightened slightly with hope. And I do forgive you, I continued. But forgiving isn't the same as forgetting. What we had is part of the past. We both need to let go. Tears began to well in her eyes. Oh, Christopher, I wish I could undo what I did, to you, to us. I mean that. But I believe we could move beyond it. I really think we deserve another shot. She wasn't ready to walk away, not yet. As difficult as it was, I had to give her the truth, clearly and kindly. She needed it. I'm in love with someone else, I told her. You mentioned Bethany said I wasn't acting like I used to, and that's true. I'm not. And yes, I am tired of chasing meaningless things. But what neither of you know is why. I've found someone new. I'm committed to her. I'm not playing games anymore. I'm with one person, and that's exactly where I want to be. Clara didn't say anything. She just looked at me, quiet, motionless. I couldn't read the expression on her face. Then she said softly, Who is it? It's Alyssa, I answered. Amber's mother. Her shoulders slumped, as if something inside her had suddenly given way. Right then, I think she finally realized there was no way to rewrite what had already been written, no path back to what we once were, no matter how much we'd shared. She came to terms with a truth I had accepted long ago. I was the kind of man who gave his heart only once, and it no longer belonged to her. We finished our meal, well, I did, without saying another word. When I placed my fork down, I looked over and said, Clara, thank you, for the dinner, and for everything we once had. I know this night didn't turn out the way you'd hoped, I continued, but someone's out there for you, and when you meet him, love him fully. Let him mean the world to you. Any resentment I had toward her had disappeared. I forgave her, not entirely on my own, but because Alyssa had been quietly guiding me toward that place of peace. And Clara? She let go of her anger too. In the end, we both reached the same understanding. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning. It means acknowledging that sometimes it's the broken chapters that lead us to the stories worth living. As I drove away from Clara's house, I called Alyssa. "So," she said, "what was all that about?" She wanted another chance. Thought maybe we could fix what broke. "Yeah, I figured. She knows what she gave up." "True," I said, "but I know what I've gained, and I wouldn't trade it." "I love you, Alyssa. You've helped me become the man I always wanted to be." "I love you too, Christopher Mallory," she said. It was the first time she'd said the words out loud. I'd always known she loved me in quiet, subtle ways, but hearing it spoken aloud still hit differently. Epilogue. Kyle and Amber got married. Alyssa and I were there, laughing, holding hands, dancing late into the night. More than a few guests joked that we looked more like the newlyweds. Clara came to the wedding, though she didn't stay long. Maybe watching how Alyssa and I loved each other was too much for her to take. 3 months after that, Alyssa and I exchanged vows ourselves. It was a simple, heartfelt ceremony in our church, surrounded by those closest to us. Everyone came except Clara. She said her calendar wouldn't allow it. But deep down, I think the real reason was this. She still hadn't made peace with the fact that I had truly moved on. Eventually, though, she found someone new. It didn't happen overnight, but she discovered her own version of joy. And I honestly hope it lasts. One last thing. On our wedding night, Alyssa whispered those same unforgettable words again. "I love the way you do it." But this time, the way she said love, there was no doubt. It carried a depth that needed no explanation.